Hello everyone, welcome to Understanding Physics, in which I will try to guide you through understanding physics. So today we'll be starting something new, in which we'll be talking about classical electromagnetism, in which we'll be discussing about the electric field, magnetic field, and then we'll be discussing about light, and then we'll be concluding with a special theory of relativity. So before we get started, I want to share what's the reference that we'll be using throughout this entire series, which is the foundations of electromagnetic theory, electromagnetic theory by Rates, Milford, and Christie, and we'll be using the fourth edition. So, so if you want to learn much more in much more detail as well as the practice problems, you should go ahead and refer to the book. But in here, I'll be focusing on the theory, and maybe we could discuss about some problems. So there will be 22 episodes through this entire series. So we'll be discussing about each of these chapters slightly, and then you could later refer to the videos for each of the topics. So we'll be first start by introduction, which is the vector analysis. So vector analysis is the basis of the electromagnetic theory or classical electromagnetics, and this will be your mathematics that you would need to follow this course. After that, we'll be talking about the electric field. So for the electric field, we'll be talking about electrostatics. So we'll be discussing about electric fields when the source is static, or pretty much it is non-moving. After that, we'll be talking about the solution for electrostatic problems. So there are tons of these problems that is already widely known, and so we'll be discussing most of them in this chapter. After that, we'll be discussing the about the electrostatic field in dielectrics. So dielectrics are pretty much materials that hinders the movement of the electric field. And we'll be later be discussing about the electrostatic field inside the dielectric, and also we'll be also explaining about the theory, so the microscopic theory of dielectrics. And then after that, we'll be discussing about the energy of electrostatic. And then finally, we'll be discussing about the current, the electric current. So the discussion of current will go towards the idea of conduction as well, and we won't be discussing about circuits in this chapter. After the discussion of electrostatics, we'll be discussing about the magnetic field. So we'll be starting by the magnetic field from steady currents. After that, we'll be discussing about the properties, magnetic properties of material or matter, magnetic properties of matter. And then after that, we'll be discussing about the magnetic theories. So the microscopic theory of magnets. From there, we could discuss about the relation, which is the electromagnetic induction. And also, we'll be discussing about the magnetic energy. So after we have already discussed about the electric field and the magnetic field, we'll be applying most of them. And so the application will be on The first we'll be discussing about the slow varying currents. So when the currents are moving slowly such that there is no change in the in the sorry, there is no change in the magnetic field or the electric field. And we'll later discuss about the circuits here. After that, we'll be discussing about plasma physics. So we'll be discussing about plasmas and how they behave. After that, we'll be discussing about electromagnetic properties of superconductors. So these are types of materials that are very conductive. And then after that, we'll be discussing about the Maxwell's equation. And the Maxwell's equation is the one that unifies the electric field and the magnetic field. The Maxwell's equations. And so from this Maxwell's equation, we'll be discussing about the electromagnetic wave, technically the propagation of the electromagnetic wave. After that, we'll be discussing about the EM wave solution in bounded regions. So in which if it has any boundaries, there will be solutions of this. So there will be lots of problems in which it involves some form of a boundary. And so this is where we'll be discussing about this. After that, we'll be discussing about the dispersion and the fields in a dispersive media. After that, we'll be discussing about radiation, source of radiation. So there are lots of radiations, but in here we'll be focusing on the electromagnetic radiation. After that, we'll be discussing about electrodynamics, in which we'll be discussing about changing electric fields. And finally, this will be the special theory of relativity, in which it comes from the Maxwell's equation that we will later discuss. Relativity. And so this is the entire chapters that we'll be discussing throughout the series. And so stay tuned for the videos coming up. So thank you very much for watching this introduction, and make sure to like and subscribe. And also, please share this to your friends who wants to understand electromagnetism in a deeper understanding. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next video.